Welcome once again to the Long Only Podcast. I'm Doug,
I'm Jerry.
and we hope you all, if you're listening to this, had a happy Easter because we're recording on Holy Thursday. Not to date ourselves, but I just did. Getting ready for all that comes with that. So first of all, Jerry, how are you doing today?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing well as well. Thank you for asking.
Good. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome for asking.
You're welcome.
We want to first take up a topic of conversation that really it's not particularly topical on this day more than any others, but it's been relevant for the past 50 years. And I call this the Blake Masters issue. This is one of the things that first attracted Jerry to unsuccessful U.S. Senate candidate Blake Masters. It was Blake Masters' idea, and it wasn't original to him, but it was something that he trumpeted, which is the ability to raise a family on a single income, and that's a treadmill that I've been very aware of. My wife and I were a two-income family. Technically, my wife has a home-based business that is not a tiny enterprise. I think many years ago, some friends of family were kind of thought she was only selling to other friends of family, and I had to explain to them, no, it's actually an endeavor. And
It's not just friend. It's more friends than family, and it's even more others than friends, right?
yeah, I mean, I've seen.
It's a business.
Pardon?
It's a real business.
It's a real business. Yep, she sells Catholic jewelry online, Tellus Art Shop, and she does a lot through Instagram. But it is something that we're incredibly blessed to have that because it's something she likes to do. It's something the whole family can be pulled into, and it is something that while she can't turn it on and off quite as easily as I sometimes think it can, orders come in, she has to fill them. It does have a certain amount of flexibility for it, and I consider ourselves very, very blessed that we have that luxury of having two incomes, but not having my wife working outside of the home because that is a treadmill that is very, very, well, it is there's a treadmill is no better way to describe it, I think.
Yeah.
And so Jerry knows a little bit about this as well, but fortunately, I mean, your spouse had the worst boss possible.
Well, keep in mind that in our case, she didn't start doing that until after our children were grown.
Touche. And yes, a different dynamic depending on the age of your kids. But if you have young kids,
then I forced her into the workforce.
Exactly, kicked her out of the kitchen.
Yeah.
Into the workforce.
Yeah.
But Jerry, your opening thoughts on this subject?
Oh, I mean, I think it's unfortunate because I do think that kids are best raised by their parents. And to whatever.
Even if one of their parents is me.
Well, okay, I'm going to say generally kids are best, but I have so much faith in Jess that I'm confident that whatever your shortcomings, she can make up for them.
Excellent.
So yeah, even in your case, and I've seen your kids; they're great kids, not a problem. Even Doug has been successful, but yeah, I think it's what it is it's unfortunate because it's just, I think it just puts too much stress on families. But I wonder how much, and I'm the first one to raise my hand and say I was guilty of this. How much of it is, an unwillingness to make the sacrifice. And it's easy for us to sit here and say that, especially now that we're past all of that part of our life anyway. You're not, we are. But how much societal pressures to, the proverbial keep up with the Joneses kind of stuff has driven people into a mode where they think that's what they have to do. That said, there's no doubt that there's places in the country that, and we came from them in California where the amount of money that you need to make in order to just be able to own a home and function is as I want to say subsistence, but maybe at least a little bit better than subsistence is stark. I mean, it's massive and frightening for a lot of people. So I just think that I believe we can sum all of this stuff up with this all ties into the extent to which government has interjected themselves into the lives of the citizenry. And why do I connect those two dots? Because in recent, not even in recent decades, over many decades now, it seems that every time, that certainly every time there's a crisis, the government is interjecting and creating, circumstances that then end up with the law of unintended consequences. But I think just in general and overall, there's just too much government spending trying to make everybody's life easier, and what it's doing in the process is making everybody's life a mess, and making and just making it more difficult. And that gets to the level of government spending. We had some pushback on some commentary that we made with respect to, hey, things aren't that bad. And a lot of that was based on looking at the balance sheet of the country and saying there's 176 some odd $trillion in assets and $30 trillion in debt. That's not totally outrageous. But the problem is that debt has been growing just incessantly. And that's where the problem comes in. Because, look, it's a pretty simple thing. Does anybody think that the government can spend money more efficiently than they can? Or the broader public that's spending their own money, making their own decisions on how the money is spent? Do you think they make better decisions about their own finances than government? I don't think you're going to find too many people that would argue, oh no, the government is extremely efficient at how they spend money. So that in and of itself tells you that we're gaining these great inefficiencies when most of the government's, when such a massive amount of the debt is just purely being created by government spending. One of the things, we keep hearing about how, strong the job market is. This is one of the most bizarre job markets, we've seen, because first of all, much of the growth in jobs has been from government jobs. Who out there really honestly can look, me or you in the eyes or anybody in the eyes and say, but government jobs are really efficient and really, people that are working for the government are super hard workers. I'm not trying to take anything away from those. There's certainly public servants out there that are, but let's all be honest that the proverbial government job is not the kind of efficient system that someone that's running their own business or having to make their way in the private sector in a competitive way. So the fact that so many of the jobs that are being created are government jobs is not good. And then you have this odd, I don't remember, maybe you can tell me if we talked about this already, but this odd circumstance where, something like 82% workforce participation, which is, and I'm going to get the ages wrong. We've talked about that. That whole thing about, that's the same level of workforce participation as in the Depression, but we only have supposedly 3-something% unemployment. Well, it's because there's 15 or 16% of the working age population that's disappeared from the workforce because they're not participating. They took their ball and went home. That's a problem. So how does this all relate to two-income families and how that relates to inflation? Let's put it this way: they're all related in that one causes the other, which then reverberates back and exacerbates the other. And I think we have a lot of that going on right now.
I will say this: that regardless of what your opinion of the cause is, and people are welcome to disagree with us. Everyone has the freedom to be wrong, but the people need to count the cost and realize what is going on. And this isn't a point that I had help getting to this point from a book I read by, I think it was Bill Bonner, a sort of economist some years ago. But a lot of the effects of inflation have been masked by the two-income family. And so we haven't fully felt a lot of this impact because we've seen that child raising duties have been somewhat outsourced. And actually, that's where we've seen the impact, is that it used to be a family could afford a couple cars, a nice house, college for the kids, and they can still afford all those things. But now they've got one more. Most of the families have one more person working to one degree, and the cracks show up more societally in terms of the effects on children. And I'm not trying to judge anyone for their particular situations. Just as many things, this mileage may vary. but that needs to be considered, and people need to be aware of that, and also apply the calculus to their own lives. Because I, when that second spouse goes out and looks for a job, ask yourself, is this going to make our lives better? Because it could be you're going a long way to go for a small drink of water. Once you factor into the impact on the kids, how much money you're actually making when you're talking about daycare, and how much running around are you doing? If you're two people working full time, no matter how much money you're making, that is a serious rat race. Got two couples working full time with young kids.
I mean, none of it. I think what Blake was ultimately arguing is it's not pro-family and promoting family. And I don't care what anybody says. You grow by growing your families. You need to have people to grow. And I realize there's a World Economic Forum world out there that thinks that we need to shrink the population. Well, that's just wrong. That's not correct. And there's those that are advocating for negative growth. I mean, all of that is just part of the anti-life world. So if you're going to promote family, and there's plenty of statistics out there from us, and we're not psychologists, we're not statisticians on this stuff, but we've read plenty of it because it ties into how we make investments as far as demographics. We've talked about the three schema that we look at: technology, business processes, and demographics, and how they fit together and how they run separately from time to time, and how that affects investment decisions through our narrative process of investment. So we have to look at all of these different things. It has to play into it. And statistics are pretty clear about the health of families and the health of people in general can be directly affected by what their family life was like, and how healthy that environment was. So I think, again, you started invoking Blake Masters, and I guess he's running for Congress now, or for Congress in Arizona. After having been beat in the Senate race. But I think he was on to something. And in fact, I think maybe had that been able to get out a little bit more strongly, he might have had better success in that race, because I think he's basically saying, look, we need to create an environment where families are promoted, where young working families don't have to necessarily have the two incomes to get by. And, and I'll tell you, I think that it still comes back to where government is getting involved. You look at the areas of where we've had the most inflation, not just recently, but over time, it's healthcare, education, and housing. What are the three areas that we've had the most influence from government spending, debt buildup supported by government? Is those three areas. And they've been off the charts for decades as far as the rise in inflation. I think the numbers were something, back when in the day when I was learning this trade and was doing financial planning type stuff, and you ran numbers on college costs, and they were always, the inflation back 20 years ago was running 7% a year.
I think you could also throw in a fourth category in there, another arm of the government: movie ticket prices. So,
well, that's just a broader, stamp prices. All those things are just often used as a broader measure of inflation.
Well, I just joke, since they're kind of an arm of the government, mouthpiece of the government values.
How about going to a professional baseball game or football game? I mean, you literally have to give up, a year's worth of your retirement income in order to support going to see professional sports nowadays. Anyway, so
you bring up a good point. And we're not the first ones to say this, but still, yet the problem persists. Why are these areas where the government is inserting itself? Why do they see the most inflation? And like the weather, everyone talks about it, but no one does anything about it.
Yeah, and we're experiencing that here in the Valley of the Sun in the last 2-3 years, more so than ever in its history, as more and more people, rightfully so, are flocking to places like this because there's a bit of freedom left from places where the freedom is being squelched, like California and New York and Illinois. But we still have that same regime that's supported all those dollars going into those particular areas is still at work, and it's driving the cost of living up in places like this as well. So it's something to note. and something to recognize. What is the solution? I think the solution is, can we possibly get some level of agreement? And it may be too late for this. I don't know. I mean, it's never too late, I suppose, but get some level of agreement that you need to unleash the private sector, the innovative part of the economy, get the shackles off of them, let them run. Problem is that I think you do have a small minority right now that has a big, loud voice and that's got some control, that's driving this agenda that's anti-growth. It's literally anti-growth. It's literally anti-family. It's literally anti-business and innovation.
Well, let's talk about what people can do from an individual standpoint, or how it can inform their investing decisions. Because I think, broadly speaking, as we've said in previous episodes, the net worth has gotten better for those who have a net worth.
Well, and some would argue that that's only because of the inflating of everything, and there's some truth to that.
There's some truth to that, but that does tell you if you want to keep up, you have to have your money somewhere other than cash and probably fixed incomes, broadly speaking.
So there's this story floating out there these days about the Great Taking, which is a book that was written by I think there's a middle name, but his name is David Webb. Give David some credit for his book. I think it was a book. There's also a documentary, I think, floating around about it, and it's very negative, and it's telling you that they're trying to take away your ownership, and there's ownership of whatever, house, securities, all of that is set up so that if you have any kind of, a custodial account like we all do at brokerage firms, they have the right to ultimately, confiscate your assets, all in the name of trying to, secure liquidity for themselves and any others. And same with your house and all this. We could spend hours going into the detail, but the point is, it's to me, it's yet another one of these cataclysmic stories of impending doom. Which if I had a penny even for every time I've heard that over almost 40 years of doing this, we probably wouldn't be doing this right now. But nothing against David, but because a lot of what he's talking about is absolutely true. It's just so the solution, and he'll give a number of different, suggestions as to what you can do. But I would challenge that if it's true that that's what's really happening, we have nowhere to hide. You have nowhere to hide. Nobody has anywhere to hide. You can't buy enough precious metals. You can't get it debt-free enough. You can't buy enough freeze-dried food to fend against that or fend that off. So I would challenge, we've been dealt a hand. We've got to play that hand. And the best way to do that is to continue to promote the kinds of pro-growth, pro-family, pro-innovation type of policies that we do promote, that you look for people that can manage through in running their business as ways to invest your money. And that's our solution to offsetting these obvious evils that are out there.
We're not denying the existence of evil, and we're not even denying that people aren't trying to enact some of these things in the long term. We're just saying that how it's going to play out, though, is not going to be that clean, that obvious. And what is your best way to manage that? And if you want to move, go into cash, canned food, and bullets, and go into a bunker, well, I mean, there's a cost to doing that too,
right? And
you're going to miss out on a lot.
And that's where I just go back to what I just said about there won't be anywhere to hide if that's really what the cataclysm is going to bring on. And even if you did somehow survive it, okay, then what? There's nobody left, or almost everybody's just shaking violently in the streets. So that to me, that ultimately ends up in some ways, there's some irresponsibility, I think, in throwing those things out there. But it is our responsibility to think about those as we relate with our clients and when we're talking about as professional money managers, how you react to these things. And, it's not to say that you don't have your outlets, that you don't have, certain things in place that could help offset some of the potential, downsides. But how many, we've been through so many different crises. I mean, and we find our way out of them. I think the problem, though, is that what the reason I say that story is true, or that what they're talking about being the negative is true, is that it's been chipping away at our wealth and standards of living. Unfortunately, and it's unnecessary. And at the lower socioeconomic levels, call it, just put it like in terms of third world nations, people literally die because of this stuff. It's horrific. In the first world, we don't live as same the level of standard, or we're not at the same standard of living that we could be in the alternative. But it's a different degree of how much it chips away at us. And especially if you're aware that those things are happening, does anybody want to deny? Well, there's no denial. I mean, since the dollar's been fiat, it's lost 90+% of its value. That's a bad thing, but that's what they've done. And who are they? Well, I don't buy that it's a concerted effort to do anything. It could well be people that are working under what they think are the best interests of the populace, of civilization, but they just are making mistakes and don't seem to be able to change that. But again, that's the hand we've been dealt, and we have been able to increase standards of living, generally speaking, except for in the last few years. COVID did actually make us take a step back in, for example, life expectancies. Maybe not surprising, but
I think you mean the response to COVID.
Right.
They just take a step back.
Yeah, and it wasn't COVID; it was the response, for sure. Far more. I saw a statistic, and there finally are some stats coming out, some research coming out, saying the number of people that died for COVID response related things is at minimum 10 times the number of people that actually died from the actual disease itself, and those numbers were skewed by a guy died in a car accident, but suffered from a positive COVID test, and they gave him a death as being caused by COVID. We all know that was happening. So anyway, getting more into it perhaps than we want to, going back to what your point was, which is the 2-income family. Might be a noble goal. What Blake was trying to do is to try and figure out, what do we need to do so that people don't have to have 2 incomes in order to get by. And I think it's a combination of maybe people tempering their expectations on their lifestyles. Yes, possibly, but also it would go a long way to have government stop stepping into everything.
Okay. So we'll leave it there. We pretty much just did one topic today that sprawled over a lot of the recurring things we're dealing with. So we will call it, again, a blessed Holy Thursday to you, Jerry, but everyone
Happy
else
Easter.
will hear this. Yep, everyone else will hear this during the octave of Easter.
Happy Triduum.
Yes. And view us on taylorfrigon.invest, also our website, taylorfrigon.com. Email us longonly@taylorfrigon.com. Give us subscribe to us on iTunes and also on YouTube. Until next week, I'm Doug.
He's Doug.
And he's Jerry.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Long Only podcast.
Bye.